Welcome to the Deconstructing Data podcast. I'm Jessie Lezak, fractional CMO at BDEX, along with David Finkelstein, founder and CEO of BDEX. What's new, David?
Hey, Jesse, good to see you. What's new? I don't know, just another busy week, right?
Yeah, definitely. Not a lot going on, besides a lot that's going on. But today we have another great guest. So please welcome Melinda Byerley. She's the CEO of Fiddlehead Marketing, LLC. I'm going to bring her in. Welcome, Melinda.
Thanks for having me, Jesse and David.
Absolutely. Welcome to the show, Melinda. We're going to ask you to kick this off for our listeners and give our listeners a chance to learn a little bit about you. So why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about your background, what led you to start Fiddlehead, and tell us a little bit about what Fiddlehead Marketing is doing for its customers.
A lot of questions. If I miss any, let me know. I started out working in Silicon Valley about 20 years ago. I went to work for eBay in 2002. I was one of the first eBay people to go over to PayPal. And as I worked my way around the valley in various marketing positions, I realized that I felt constrained as a marketer. I wanted to be able to help more than one company at the same time. And so about 7 or 8 years ago, I started a fractional consultancy with a very bad name of Timeshare CMO. Everybody thought we were going to be selling timeshares, but we rebranded to Fiddlehead, and we are a digital marketing consultancy. We typically work strategically with marketing analytics, and now most recently, we are starting to work with AI as well.
That's awesome. I appreciate that background, and it's a good transition. Having worked for companies like eBay and PayPal, I'm sure you've got a lot of great experience there that you're able to bring to your customers and your clients now.
Yes, thank you. And of course, within our clients, we serve some of the biggest unicorns in the valley. So we've worked with companies like GitHub and Stack Overflow and Netflix and other places. So we've worked both B2B, B2C, and we think that one informs the other, that there's real benefit and understanding. And Jesse's nodding. She's like, marketing is, B2B can learn from B2C and vice versa. And it's good to have
It's
that.
just human.
Yes.
Definitely. Well, I guess on that, let's get off into our first topic, which is marketing analytics, as well as AI in marketing analytics. Can you kick us off on this topic, Melinda?
Well, so I'm an accidental sort of person that got into marketing analytics. I have an MBA. I was very much about attribution in analytics when I was working at PayPal and became sort of interested in how we tracked things on the web and discovered this little known product at the time called Omniture. And so I helped install Omniture, which became Adobe Analytics on the PayPal website. And it was more controversial than you might think at the time. And so I started realizing that very few marketers understood how much it mattered the way that analytics was added to the site and how well it was implemented, and that would determine the outcome. So garbage in, garbage out. And so almost by necessity or need, I wanted to create the data I always wanted to make decisions. And that's how I became focused in marketing analytics as a career. And now I'm incredibly excited about the potential for AI to take out the parts of the job that are the most sort of drudgery, the things that get in the way of being able to determine what action should be taken from the data. Because in the end, the data doesn't mean anything if we don't do something with it.
So what do you see as some of the more current advancements in AI with respect to marketing analytics?
I think we're a little behind. I think it's not happening right away on the analytics space unless you are inside of a large company or you have access to the talent that can do some things. And the reason I say that is because of privacy. So a couple of reasons. One is the big companies in the valley have been doing AI for a long time. I can guarantee you some of our clients, they have had their hands in this pie for a while. And in fact, marketers are saying, what the marketers of these companies like, what do you mean AI? We've been doing this, like it's happening on the back end already.
Mm-hmm.
And so some of that is there, but I think as we go out to sort of like the Series B, Series C startups, right? The high growth, fast startups, if their main business is not in AI, they can still struggle to get their hands on the talent that they need to do this. And right now, it's my assessment that a lot of the tools that are out there for AI and data do not protect the data. They do not keep it safe. They do not keep it proprietary. And I think we're close. I don't think we're that far away, but we're watching it like a hawk, and we want to stay on it and jump on the places that we see it happening. But I think it's going to be a little while before it's totally mainstream. And I fully expect at some point Google will help us out a great deal once they feel like they're, maybe they've got fewer of their hands on deck for search. They'll be able to turn their attention to applying AI to Google Analytics data and all that good stuff.
Yeah, that's an interesting take, because Google has struggled actually to some extent with respect to the latest version of Google Analytics, right? And
To
so
say the least.
right, and so it'll be interesting to see if they can take the lead that you're suggesting and actually apply some AI tools to improve upon what exists today. And
Well, they're going to have everybody nipping at their heels with Salesforce and Tableau, with Microsoft and Copilot. It's, this will, I think, be the next race after sort of search and generative AI, because just the need is so great on the data front.
Oops, Jesse, you're on mute.
Ooh, interesting. I was just saying that's very interesting. Is there anything else you'd want to add on marketing analytics, AI in marketing analytics, just in general?
Maybe I'm crotchety as I get older, but I see a lot of talk about this brand new tool for AI or this brand new tool for analytics. And ultimately, if we're tracking cookies, it's very hard to differentiate. Cookies are notoriously difficult. They're the only tool we have in a lot of cases, and we have to use them. But I remain skeptical until proven otherwise. Sometimes I've been right to be skeptical. Sometimes I've been wrong. So you always have to be humble when you're making predictions when it comes to technology. But as we often say here, we tend to overestimate the change in the short term and underestimate it in the long term.
That's an interesting perspective.
Yeah, well, I think, to your point, I think there's been a heavy reliance on cookies for a long time. And I think with third-party cookies finally, officially getting deprecated very soon, we are, going to run into more issues especially when it comes to analytics. And now Google's even talking about IP protection, blocking access to IP addresses. And I think that is going to have a big effect as well, because I think that a lot of companies right now are sort of relying on IP as a backup to
as a proxy for identity, you mean?
Yeah.
Well,
And
I think the third-party cookie thing, I'm, again, a little sort of contrarian on this. Most reliable and reputable brands have been using first-party cookies for a long time. Third-party has been going away for a long time. We are not in a cookie-less future. This is my rant. I'll try to get out of the way quickly. That we are not cookieless, and that term disturbs me, because we will not be cookieless unless we are willing to accept an internet that is not stateless. Or that is not stateful. So if we like logging into Amazon because we've saved our username and password, that's thanks to cookies. If we like websites to interact with us based on who we are, that's stateful. And the two go hand in hand. And so I don't think cookies are going away, but I do think, I agree with you, I call it the light in the cave is getting dimmer. It's getting dimmer again. I happen to believe, it's my belief, that most marketers don't need that. Cohorts are enough for most people. Some companies may need that one-to-one relationship, particularly for retention over the long time. But then you have that information, you know who they are. But for acquisition, I think in most cases, cohort will do will do it. And a part of me is sort of glad to see some of this go away. Sorry.
So what happens to attribution then?
Well, it's always been hard, right, David? It's always been hard. So anybody who's like, oh, well, it's hard. Well, it's never been easy if you did it right. That's how I got into this. If you told me 20 years ago I'd still be doing it, I'd have told you were crazy. I thought we'd have all this resolved by now.
Right.
So it's not easy. It's never been easy to do it right, particularly on the B2B side, particularly on the high value sales where you're closing deals offline, where you're building relationships offline. It's incredibly hard. So I don't know in that case, like some of that some of that dependence, I guess what I'm trying to say, may not have been well placed. There's been so much, fraud, click fraud, ad fraud, so much messiness and noisiness in that data that there's a part of me that's like, let's burn away some of that and try to get closer to what the reality might be.
That's a really good point that you bring up, especially since we have the fraud-free guarantee, right, David? And
Yeah, well, for sure. But one of the concerns that I have is that actually when you start, when you get into proxying IPs, it actually makes ad fraud even more difficult to detect.
Mhm.
And so that's going to be a
mm,
problem.
yeah, that's true. This is all leading into our next topic, data privacy and ethics. So there's a lot to unpack here, and we could take this anyway. So Melinda, do you want to kick us off on it?
Sure. Just this is a quick background. I became interested in the issues of data privacy and ethics in the aftermath of the 2016 election. In the lead up to that election, I was on social media and buying, media from my clients and watching what was happening. It felt a bit like Cassandra. It was so obvious to me that if I was someone who meant harm to the United States for any reason, why wouldn't I buy a lookalike audience and try to influence them? Propaganda, the United States has done it over our history. We dropped leaflets after the war. So I mean, this is a tactic that's used in nation state, and I think it continues to be used. And at the same time, I saw a documentary on Netflix about a young woman who had been working for Cambridge Analytica, but she didn't realize what was going on, and she didn't feel empowered to talk about it. I became passionate about trying to find a way to help the people that are on the front lines of managing data know when something isn't ethical, and try to help them realize when that's a conflict with their own values, and have the skills to sort of improve that. The Digital Analytics Association invited me 3 years ago to found their first data privacy and ethics committee. We are cross-functional. We have brands, we have agency engineers, marketers like myself, and the idea is to come up with a set of standards that we as data analysts can support. And knowing that the topic is complex, deeply complex, how do you separate ethics from your personal morals and values is a challenge. But that shouldn't stop us from trying to come up with a baseline and see if we can sort of move that ball forward. As I like to say, who else besides us? If we don't do it, who will? Nobody owns it inside of organizations. It can be in finance, IT, and legal doesn't know enough about how the data is used, that we who would know it best should really be the champions for using data responsibly.
Yeah, no, those are really good points. And I think that when you look back at all the sort of changes in policy and legislation, and you look at the changes that Google has made and Apple's made, a lot of these things have been done to sort of prevent the you know the the bad doers that have done these things with our data in the past. And it's unfortunate that we live in a society where we have to sort of put limitations on what we can do as marketers, right? In exchange for ethics, simply because there are so many people that are disregarding ethical use of data.
I was talking to a friend of mine recently about the law and business, and I was remembering something that my macroeconomics professor talked about, which was the idea that the law is there to make sure that the bad actors don't crowd out the good ones. It's very hard to run a a profitable, a compliant, if you will, ethically high integrity data analysis if everybody else is breaking the law and doing all sorts of sketchy things.
Mhm.
And so I like the way he thought about it. Was yes, and of course it's academic in a certain way, and abuse is rampant, and there are always challenges, but that again does not mean we should not try.
Yeah, I
absolutely.
like that.
And I liked what you said, especially for LinkedIn. I think it's a good topic that if you sort of like if you see something, say something, and
Mhm.
kind of empowering people at the front lines of data. Never really thought about it like that. But if there is anyone in the comments, we'd love to hear from you on anything that we're talking about. We can display it on the screen if anyone has any questions. But anything
If
else
I
you want to?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll add something to this. We recently released the results of the first ever data privacy and ethics survey of the Digital Analytics Association. And one of the things that blew us away was how a large majority of our members are are in a situation where their personal morals are in conflict, or their ethics, with how data is being used in their own company.
Hmm.
Honestly, that
It's
doesn't.
shocking, isn't it?
No,
It
it
can be
actually
shocking.
doesn't surprise me, to be honest with you, because I know that there's so many companies that are collecting data that don't have the mechanisms in place even to know how to, keep it safe, safeguard it. The data can exist on multiple devices, even on individuals, computers that are working with that data that may not have that data in a secure environment. The big companies, the bigger the companies, probably the more controls they have in place for that. But there are how many millions of small businesses out there that are collecting data that don't have those controls in place, and
No
so
governance. Yep.
yeah, there's no governance, there's no controls. We've seen it. We've worked with clients and talked to them about where their data resides, and sometimes they don't even know. And they're like,
Mhm.
I think it's here, here, and here, and and Susan might have a copy of the data, the entire database on her computer as well. So it's like, with that being said, it makes all that data very vulnerable,
It's
right?
printed out in files stacked up against the wall.
Yeah.
And now with people working remotely, it's even more of an issue.
Hmm.
Cybercrime is on the rise, and one of the fastest growing parts of cybercrime are insiders.
Yeah.
And so it's hard to say, like, nobody wants to be in the position of of surveilling their own employees. It's terrible. It's a
Mhm.
terrible way to go about the world, and yet this is happening. And then you have turnover. The average tenure of a CMO is 27 months. It's probably, more in smaller companies. And so with more turnover, there's more fragmentation of this effort started and failed, this effort started and failed. Everything is all over the place. We don't have a plan to sunset, and then combine it with, and I know this because I was one of those people, the mindset of let's collect all the things. We don't know what we want to track, so let's track all the things.
Mhm.
When in reality, we don't need to track all the things. But it's very hard for companies to slow down for a moment and say, what are we tracking? Why are we tracking it? What changes? What will we do with this? If we're not going to do anything with it, we shouldn't be tracking it.
Mm,
And for example, I mean, I love, David, that we talked a little bit about in the pre-show about PII. Fiddlehead avoids it. We call it a virus, in the sense of, if we don't want to touch it, and if we do, we want to be highly protected. We want to have lots of safeguards in place, and we found we could do the vast majority of our work without ever having to take possession of, if you will, or to have to put controls in place around PII.
Mhm.
yep. All very relevant stuff. But anything else, any other lasting thoughts on data privacy and ethics before we move into creating cultures that are data driven? Um, anything else?
Yeah.
So I'll just,
David, anything you want to add?
Look, I mean, I think you made a lot of good points. I agree with them.
Mhm.
The data privacy has always been something that's been forefront for us as a company. We being a very high tech company, we have a lot of safekeepings in place, a lot of security in place that, as we talked about, a lot of other companies don't have, unfortunately. So we are very keen to keeping data secure and private, and protecting that. Um, and we are a huge proponent of ethical use of data. And that's something we talk to our clients about all the time, is trying to understand, what their end game is, what their goal is, what data that they need to do that, what data they're keeping internally, that they may need to do that, and what their intentions are, and how they'll use it. And I think that's super important. I think that going forward, there will continue to be more legislation that will continue to restrict, how data can be used, how it can be collected. Um, I think that there's always going to be the problem of keeping it secure, because, like I said, only the biggest companies really have the technology and controls in place to do that. So that will forever be a problem, for SMBs, being able to keep that data secure. And I think that if someone can resolve that, I think that would be, that would be a big win for everyone, every individual, because we all know that we have a lot of data out there that's been kept on, collected about us, and it's hard to say exactly where it is, right?
And
It's
we're
insane.
both, I often joke, I have my marketing horns, like my evil marketing horns. Like there's me as a consumer, and then there's me with my evil marketing horns. And the evil
Mhm.
marketing horns want to track everything, all the things, and they
Yeah.
want to know that David Finkelstein lives here and he buys this. But the consumer in me is very freaked out about that and doesn't want shoes from Nordstrom's following me around all over the web once I've decided I don't want them anymore.
Mhm.
And I don't know, and the solution to that has got to be somewhere in the middle. I come back to cohorts. I would be very curious on your perspective of cohorts are the solution to that. I've often said, I don't need to know that David bought a thing. I need to know that a group of people with roughly these characteristics are buying the things.
Mm.
And that's usually enough for most media buying. But maybe things are evolving. You're actually, that might even be closer to this specific problem than I've been in a little bit.
Yeah, I think cohorts are a short-term solution to the problem. I think the long-term solution is AI, to be honest with you. I
Oh,
think
good.
that
I'm excited to hear this.
I think that, being able to anonymously track activity, right? A user's activity, and use that, within an ad platform to understand those behaviors that are occurring and target ads based on those behaviors that are occurring across someone's activity, completely anonymously. I think that AI will have the capability of doing that more effectively, enabling you to sort of reach audiences. You can call it an audience of one, right? A lot of people use that term
Mhm.
where the AI is narrowing down. Okay, this consumer is doing this. Okay, I think that person needs this ad. Rather than looking at it as a group and saying, okay, well, maybe this group might respond correctly to this ad, see how it performs, and say, okay, well, we need to adjust the core cohort to something else. I think that the cohorts are a good sort of interim solution, but I think AI will ultimately be the long-term solution.
It's an intriguing idea of the cohort of one. I don't think I've heard of it yet. And I was thinking, well, oh, that's interesting because then you could make a decision, a marketing decision without knowing that it was David. It's
Yeah,
just that it's not big enough. What if for whatever reason this cohort is not big enough to drive business results? So we need to change the parameters and build a larger cohort without
right.
knowing that David bought the thing.
Yeah. Yeah, it
Mhm.
doesn't
Fascinating.
matter who it is, right? I mean, it
No.
ultimately comes down to it. Everybody's been concentrating on who should we target, but the reality is once you've sort of automated the process, it doesn't matter who it is. It just
Right.
matters, is it working, right? And if
Mhm.
it's and if these ads are working for this individual, then we'll continue to run ads for that individual. But if not, then the AI learns and finds out what is working for that individual. And I think what ultimately you'll see is that over the long term, it's going to work so much better because it will learn what your trends are, right? Today, you might have been searching for
Oh,
shoes.
goodness.
Tomorrow,
It's
you might be
drudgery.
looking for a car.
It's drudgery to do that now. It's absolute
Yeah,
drudgery, and it's not actionable because by the time you do it, things have changed. It takes
right.
weeks or months to do it now.
Yeah,
Being able to do it in even close to, like, a week would be useful, and
yeah,
with AI, it can go even faster than that once it's
right.
done. That's very exciting.
Yeah.
Well,
Ooh.
very exciting. Well, how do we create cultures that can manage all of this and lead us down the right path ethically with it?
I bet the 2 of you would agree that the data problems are people problems, as I say.
Mm,
Almost always, it's
Yes.
technology is not the barrier. The data is not the barrier. It's some combination of culture and accountability. And some people just really fight that, or they fear it. Fight is the wrong word because then it implies people don't want to be held accountable, but they're fearful. Especially, and I often say, if you show me a culture of fear, I will show you a culture that is not data driven
Mhm.
because you
mm.
don't want to be accountable if you're in an environment where you're punished for your mistakes.
Yeah.
It should be safe. It should be, oh, I tried something and it didn't work. Great. Now what's the next thing? Not, oh, you terrible person. This failed. And we should be using the data to size the quality of our bet and the size of our bet and manage that risk accordingly. So in my experience, when a CMO comes to me and says we don't know how to track, I often say, what is your relationship with your CEO? Because this is where it's going to end up almost always. If we can't track, it's almost always not marketing's fault. I'm going to take a stand on that and say it's very rarely marketing's fault. I actually just had a really interesting conversation with a strategic consultant who's about to publish a book, like interviews with like 1,500 CEOs. And it was interesting how few of them could see past the fact that they might be abdicating on this. That this should be CEO led. If we can't track, if finance has a different opinion, and I've seen this, you've seen it too, right? Finance is using Power BI and marketing's using Snowflake, products using something completely different. Nobody agrees. Are we looking at an elephant? Are we looking at a rhinoceros? And so it starts with, how do we trust each other? How do we trust the data? Almost all of our data consulting engagements, we call it trust. You'll often see it glossed over in these marketing analytics maturity models. They'll call it setup or whatever. In my mind, in my experience, it's trust. They don't trust each other. They don't trust the data. So if you don't trust your colleague in the other silo, then whatever they tell you, it doesn't matter. Data doesn't change people's minds. If it did, we would live in a very different world. We would we would have things that we would all like to have if data was enough to convince people. But if you look at psychology, if you look at the way what we're learning about how the mind works with functional MRI, we won't believe data unless it comes from somebody we trust. And alternatively, we will believe untruths if we trust the source.
That's so interesting.
That's
Trust
true.
is everything. I believe it.
You've probably experienced it too, and we gloss over it because we go to results. We want results. Okay, CMO, go grow the company, go get results. But you don't trust them enough to give them the resources. You don't trust them enough to take the risks yet. So it's a very difficult problem. And I'd actually be curious to hear how you guys have tackled it in your careers, because I've gotten more and more interested as time has gone on, because it's not a technology problem.
Yeah, I mean, culture is the ultimate importance, right? I mean, you have to have a culture of trust. I agree with that 100%. Your team members need to trust each other across departments and divisions. If not, then they won't share with each other. Right? And when they do share, they won't trust each other, so they're going to do double the work, right? Because you'll see times where someone does something and someone says, "Well, I don't believe it, so I'm going to go do it also." So now you have two people doing the same thing instead of, that's not very effective, right?
And pointing fingers too. Well, my data says this, and my data says this, and magically my data says you're wrong, and magically your data says I'm wrong. Come on.
Yeah. So, the way I've always looked at it is to hire people that know more than me. So
same. I prefer to not be the smartest person in the room. I feel safer when that's the case.
Yeah. So, I hire someone like Jesse in marketing that knows it better than I do. I hire my CTO because he knows better on the technical side than I do. And then really what happens is you sort of have this culture where everybody respects the fact that they're each, an expert in their area, and therefore, opens up that sort of line of trust.
It's interesting. This person I was talking to, we both agree that the trust between CEO and CMO as a whole is very bad right now. And it's complicated, right? Marketing has a brand problem. Not all of us who do this job are ethical and qualified, and some are using hacks and creating a problem. We don't have a set of standards as a profession about what makes this. And then sometimes you have a situation on the CEO side, like he had interviewed somebody who'd been a CEO for 10 years and had 5 CMOs. And it was like, at some point, do you ask yourself if it's you? Right? If you've been through 5 CMOs in 10 years, maybe the problem is not the marketing department. And that was, and I do see it as truly both ways. And as a CEO myself, and I'm sure you too, David, as a CEO, you kind of have empathy, how hard the job is, but I would love to also hear how you tackle it. Because that's what I often say to the CMO. We're going to end up in your CEO's office, because ultimately we're going to talk about trust, because you can't track everything in marketing. You cannot. And often the things you should be doing can't be tracked. They may be a little bit. Maybe you can get some high-level metrics. But for example, content marketing and B2B, how do you prove that all this content you put out resulted in this contract? You can't.
Right.
So ultimately, you have to agree on how you'll measure it, how you'll define a marketing qualified lead. But after that, it really does come down to how well you trust the person. So if you've got answers, I'd love to hear them, because this seems to be where good data projects go to die.
Communication is key.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think communication is key. I think that it comes down to, I think often it comes down to people's hiring methods as well. And
Agreed.
so, we historically have used a tool we call Culture Index.
Okay.
It's similar to any personality, sort of test, but it's very unique. And I think what it does best is it helps understand whether the person is the right person for the job. So, right people in the right seats. You always, need to look at it from that point of view. And we've historically have done that, where I never would look at a resume without looking at the test first, because it's too easy for someone to fall in love with a candidate based on their resume. Oh, they've worked for this company. Oh, they've done that. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they're, culturally the right person, not only for the job, but for your company. And I think people often make the mistake of hiring somebody based on the resume instead of based on the behavioral traits of that human being that you're going to be working with side by side.
Based on more data. No, I
Yes, that's what
appreciated
it
that
is.
test, because then it made me feel good too. I'm like, oh, so it says that, it'd be a good fit. So no, I think that's a great idea.
Yeah. Jessie was questioning the test because she's like, really? It says I have a high ego. Do I? And I'm like, it's okay. Like that's not necessarily a bad thing. You know what I mean? There's, different levels of ego, but there's different roles in a company that require it, and if you don't have it, you can't succeed in your job if you don't have a high ego in a certain job, in certain roles.
And sales, I mean, you need that.
Sales
Like,
yeah.
that would be
Yes.
bad if
Yeah.
low ego salesperson might struggle.
Yeah, I can't tell you how many people over the years I've seen a culture index for that applied for a sales job, and their ego was like super, super low, like to the on what the chart literally calls it, on the meek side. And how could this person be in sales? There's, as soon as someone says no, they're gonna,
That doesn't mean you have to be a shark, but meek might be a problem. Yeah.
yeah.
It's so true. I mean, and how you solve that is, there's not enough attention paid to hiring, for sure. And I do think many CEOs in the Valley have come sort of, especially if they're engineering background based. Again, because some of my profession are not good examples, that
Mhm.
there's a lot of mistrust, and I think they throw the baby out with the bathwater, if you'll excuse the expression. All marketers must be charlatans, or all we do is buy ads, instead of seeing, like, what I call the capital M, the strategic value of marketing and how we can partner
Mhm.
to be successful. I think we've gone too far the other way in Silicon Valley. We were very far on the business side when I got here 20 years ago. That was not great, because engineers were not involved in facing the market. There were so few of them. They had to be sort of carefully protected. But now that we have this, we've gone all the way to the other side, and I don't think that's good either. I'm a moderate in all ways. So I want everybody to have a voice at the table. I think that's how we get better results.
Absolutely. It's
Agreed.
all great points. Well, we only have 10 minutes left. We did get a comment from Dawn. I'm going to pull it up here really quick. So, we will get better as we continue to stress the importance of the experience. Data really is useful for the company and the thief. Most ransoms seem silly at this point. The why of data will be the most important reason to have data. And then he's talking about the phone book, which is funny memory. And he does agree AI and blockchain tech will improve everything. But wanted to share those. Any comments before I ask you about your tech stack?
It was one thing on the last topic, and then I'll address his comment,
Sure.
which was, I was talking to a leader at Google a number of years ago, and he said to me, he's talking about how he had one of the more diverse groups at Google, and he would tease Larry and Sergey that, he was bringing up the numbers. And I asked him, well, how does that come to be? And he said, well, I can hire a PhD. I'm Google. At this was a few years back. I can basically hire anybody I want. I have the budget. I can get a PhD. But what I don't have are the people who can ask the CMO of Unilever, can have a discussion with the CMO of Unilever about, what do I do about it? So I often say that executives don't need to know the barometric pressure. They need to know whether or not to take an umbrella. And so I think we spend a lot of time focusing on data skills and do you know SQL and do you know Python and do you know what do you have? You have a PhD in statistics, that's great. But I've met PhDs in statistics who are awesome data scientists, but they don't know what to do with it. They don't that's I think that's where I love the partnership is to pair that type of person with a clever and creative marketer is just magic gold. I do remember the phone book and not just sitting on it as a child. I would be curious to know the context for the comment, but my question would be back then, it was very hard to do anything with it. Yes, everybody's name was in the phone book, but what would you do with it? Yes, could you manually type out a bunch of letters and send them to people? You were limited by your time and energy, and so very few people did it. There was a physical cost, and now the cost of this is so low and the potential return is high, so why not take the risk? It's back to phishing and spam. Why not? It costs you fractions of a penny send out spam or to do whatever, and the likelihood of you getting caught or whatever is so low that there's no barrier anymore. Oh,
Yeah.
thanks, Don. I'm glad I can be right.
For people who will hear this on audio, Don replied, "You are so freaking right." But yeah, I want to make sure that we ask you at least about your tech stack, Melinda. So if you don't mind, this is something we ask all the guests on Deconstructing Data. What are some of your favorite tools that you use in your tech stack?
So I don't know if I will come in like as the top of all of your data tech stack because a lot of what I'm doing now is working with executives and sort of doing the culture stuff. But with all the talk for ChatGPT-4, I'm in love with Claude. I'm saying I'm having an affair with ChatGPT with Claude because the quality of its output is amazing, and being able to take something that I want to write and make it more what I really believe. I tend to have a very direct, sometimes even edgy writing style. I don't know if it's years on Twitter or what it is, but my sentences are short and sometimes come off as terse. And being able to shape that with Claude it sits open. It's sitting here on my monitor right now, and I use it all the time, using for emails, for posts on LinkedIn, for replies, just to get the tone right. And it's so much easier than sitting there and talking with it for an hour. Just dump it into Claude. Its voice just suits me so much better. And I love being able to use it to ask it to reply in the style of McKinsey consulting, because sometimes that's what you need. And I am not a McKinsey consultant, but sometimes you need that voice in order to do the thing that you need to do to get the credibility. And so honestly, this is my plug for Claude. I'm just having a ball with it. ChatGPT can do a lot of things, but there's just something about the voice of Claude that feels warm and human. I don't know if you guys have had the same experience, but
I haven't tried that one yet. Yeah,
oh,
I'm gonna try it. Yeah.
the free one is I just signed up for the pro. I've been using, but I got into it and I've been using it as a thought partner. This is another way I tell people is to talk to the AI like it's human, but never forget that it's human. So personally, I don't know if you want this story, but personally, I struggle with vision and mission statements. I'm Gen X. I'm kind of skeptical and cynical about manipulating people. Um, and I just feel like so many vision and mission statements are BS. And I had a conversation with Claude. I said, Claude, I know my own company needs a mission statement. I have an MBA. I know I'm supposed to do this, but I hate it and I don't want to do it. And I can't find anything I like. And over the course of several days, because I wasn't paying at the time, so I'd cap out. It actually answered my questions. It actually helped me think through the problem and come up with a vision statement and a mission statement that I really could live with and really could get behind and could operationalize and not feel. And so because it's not human, I can whine at it. I can complain to it. I can say, I hate that. It's terrible. I don't have to, I'm ADHD. I don't have to hold anything back. I'm not going to hurt its feelings. And that is helpful for me as a thought partner. So I don't know if it qualifies as a tech stack, but it certainly is my own form of co-pilot sitting
I
next to
think
me
it
every
does.
day.
Absolutely. Sounds like a very important part of your tech stack.
Yeah.
I would say the other one I'm learning about is there's a lot of Gen Xers on TikTok, and I've been having fun with it. I was in cancer treatment last year. I'm going to be fine, but during some of the darkest days, TikTok just kept me entertained. And so I got curious about it, like all marketers. And there's a tool called CapCut, which is just fantastic. It's like Canva, but for video. And I just love it. And so I've started editing little otter videos and I'm just playing around with it because I remembered having like, what is it, Ecamm Pro and like all these other video softwares were so hard to learn, and this one has just been delightful and fun to play with.
I love
So
CapCut. I do the
it's
same.
great.
I make cooking videos and yoga videos. Yes, it's my thing.
Yes, it's fantastic.
Cool. Well, I'll have to
That's
find you on TikTok, Melinda. How can folks find you on TikTok?
I just use my name at Melinda Byerley. Nothing. That's the good news. I don't have there aren't many people in the world with my name, so if you search for it, you'll find me. So yeah, and I have a very small account, and I'm really just dabbling and playing around. So, but yes, if people want to come and play with me, that would be great. I have a group of, and I recommend this to people, a group of other marketers in private DM, and what we're doing is pushing each other to learn. What did you learn today? What are you doing? I tried this. I've learned this tool, or how do I do this? And yes, there are lots of tools and resources out there, but there's nothing like having a little support group.
Cool. What tool do you guys coordinate in for your?
We just do it in TikTok and DM. So we send each other our videos, and yes, we upvote or and try to support each other. But mostly, it's like, here's what I learned, or here's a video I found, or I like this style. Does anybody know how I can do it? That kind of thing. So get a group of friends together. It's like a book club, except it's the TikTok club.
Marketing club.
Marketing club, yes.
Excellent.
I love that. Well, thank you so much for sharing. And so now that we know where to find you on TikTok, where can listeners find you if they're not on TikTok?
Please visit our website, which is Fiddlehead HQ, and you can go to /marketing AI if you want to focus on that specifically. But if you just go to fiddleheadhq.com, you can obviously get to the website. And I'm doing most of my own social media on LinkedIn these days, probably just like you. I think that's where the right conversations are to be had. So you can find me there as well.
Yes. And just for the record, it sounds like Dawn is completely in agreement with you about Claude over ChatGPT. So thanks, Dawn, for your engagement. Would love to have you back. But in closing, we would like to just ask listeners to be sure to check out bedex.com. And when you're there, go click the try for free button to check out OmniIQ. If you're here watching on video, you can just use this QR code that I have over my face here, and that'll take you right to OmniIQ, where you can import a list of your first-party customer data and see some analytics on your first-party customer data. So you'll get gender, household income, and birth year, all complimentary, no credit card required. But you're of course not going to want to stop there. You're going to want to see more, and so you can upgrade to see more, and also create an expanded audience. We'll say, I won't say lookalike audience, because you're pulling data from multiple places, right, David? It's different than just like a lookalike audience than Facebook. It's really a lot better. So check it out. And we'd love to hear from you. So if you have any feedback about deconstructing data, or you would like to suggest a guest to come on the show, please reach us at info@bedex.com and share your qualitative data with us so we can make it better for you. And thanks again so much for joining us, Melinda.
I was glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you, Melinda. It was great to have you on the show today.
All right. Have a good one, everyone.